Millionaire decided to test his poor girlfriend, telling her that his company had failed and what she does with him makes him cry. Andrew Green always knew that life at the top came with a price. As the owner of one of the largest tech companies in the country, he had everything money could buy: mansions, luxury cars, extravagant trips. But there was one thing money could never secure for him: trust. After years of being surrounded by people who cared only about his fortune, Andrew had developed a skeptical instinct, especially when it came to relationships. As he looked at Sophia, sitting across from him on the small, worn fabric couch, Andrew couldn't help but admire the simplicity she radiated. Sophia was the opposite of every woman he'd ever known. She worked as a waitress in a modest restaurant and lived in a two-room apartment. Yet her smile was a constant light, her kindness rare and inspiring. Even so, a persistent voice in his mind made him question, was she truly different? It was late, and the rain tapped softly against Sophia's apartment window. Sitting in the cramped armchair, Andrew felt his heart race. He had made his decision. If he wanted to continue with Sophia, he needed to be sure she loved him for who he was, not for what he had. "Sophia, we need to talk." His voice came out more tense than he had planned. She put down the cup of hot tea she was holding, giving him her full attention. Her brown eyes reflected concern. "Of course, Andrew, what's going on? You seem nervous." He sighed, running his hands over his face. Part of him wanted to back out right then and there, but his doubts were louder. "Sophia, my company, it went under. I've lost everything." The silence in the apartment was so palpable it seemed to echo. Sophia blinked a few times, as though processing what she had just heard. Andrew held his breath, waiting for some reaction that might confirm his fears, maybe shock, hesitation, or even a faint hint of disappointment. But what came next surprised him. "Everything?" she asked, with an almost unsettling calmness. "What do you mean, everything?" "Everything, Sophia. The debts piled up. Investments failed. I'm not the man you met anymore. I don't have money, cars, or even a place to live." He kept his voice steady, though the weight of the lie was beginning to settle on his shoulders. "I'll understand if this changes things for you." Sophia looked at him with a mix of empathy and determination. She stood up and walked over to him, sitting on the edge of the couch. Without saying a word, she took his hands in hers. There was a tenderness in her gesture that made Andrew's heart tighten. "Andrew, do you think that matters to me?" Her voice was soft but firm. "I never fell in love with what you have. I fell in love with who you are. And if all you have now is the courage to start over, then that's what we'll work with, together." He was speechless. Sophia was serious, but there was a light in her eyes that seemed unshakable. She didn't ask for details about the bankruptcy, nor did she show any hesitation. It was as if his comfort was her only concern. "But what about the apartment? I don't have anywhere to go," he pressed, still searching for any sign of selfishness. "Then you stay here with me," Sophia said without hesitation. "It's not much, but it's enough for the two of us. You can sleep in my bed. I'll take the couch." Andrew felt a lump in his throat. He hadn't expected such generosity, especially so immediately. Sophia lived with so little, and yet she was willing to give up her own comfort for him. The simplicity of her apartment was almost painful compared to the luxury he was used to. A patched-up couch, a wooden table that had seen better days, and a kitchen that looked like it belonged to another decade. Yet for Sophia, it was home, and she was ready to share it all with him. "Sophia, you don't have to do this," he started, but she cut him off. "Yes, I do," she said, smiling, though her eyes glimmered with a hint of worry, "because when you love someone, you do what you can. And I know that if it were the other way around, you'd do the same for me." Her words weighed heavily on Andrew's chest. He wanted to tell her that she had no idea what he was really capable of, that he was testing her trust. that every word she spoke only deepened his guilt. "You're incredible, Sophia," he managed to say, his voice hoarse with emotion. She laughed softly, squeezing his hands once more before standing up. "Now let's make dinner. I'm sure you're stressed and food always helps," she said as she moved to the kitchen, as if life hadn't just changed drastically. Andrew sat there, feeling like a stranger in his own body. He had planned that moment expecting a different reaction, maybe even justifying the doubts he had about her. But Sophia's response didn't just disarm his distrust, it exposed something he had been avoiding, how different she was from anyone he had ever known. Still, he wasn't ready to end the test. Part of him insisted he needed to be sure. Sophia, innocent and full of love, had no idea she was being tested. But for Andrew, this was just the beginning of a dangerous game where he might lose the one thing that truly mattered. The days following Andrew's lie were a mix of guilt and confusion. He had returned to Sophia's small apartment after yet another day of fictitious meetings, encounters he pretended to attend in an effort to sustain the facade of his bankruptcy. Sophia, as always, greeted him with a warm smile, despite the obvious fatigue from her long shifts at the restaurant. Andrew watched her in silence as she prepared dinner that evening. The kitchen was small, but the aroma of garlic and herbs wafting from the stove filled the space, bringing a sense of comfort he hadn't realized he needed. Despite the simplicity around her, Sophia seemed perfectly happy. He wondered how someone could be so resilient in a situation that should have been devastating, yet the doubt continued to gnaw at him. What would happen if he truly needed something more? If beyond a roof and comforting words, he required a bigger sacrifice? Determined to test Sophia's limits, Andrew devised the next step of his plan. After dinner, as the two sat on the couch, he sighed deeply, feigning a growing despair. "Sophia." His voice was low and laced with rehearsed anguish. "I think I've made a terrible mistake trying to start over. I need help." She immediately put down the cup of tea she was holding, her eyes searching his with concern. "What happened, Andrew? You can tell me." He hesitated for a moment, almost unable to continue, but committed to the plan, he took a deep breath and pressed on. "I tried reaching out to some contacts to see if I could raise some money, but no one's willing to help. Without some seed money, I won't be able to get back on my feet. I'm out of options." Sophia remained silent for a few seconds, biting her lower lip as she processed his words. Andrew saw the worry settle on her face and felt a pang of guilt. He had expected her to at least show hesitation, but what came next left him completely speechless. Sophia stood up from the couch, her hands trembling slightly as she walked toward the bedroom. "Give me a minute, Andrew," she said without looking back. Andrew stayed put, trying to guess what she was doing. A long minute passed before she returned to the living room with a small blue box in her hands. He recognized the box immediately. He had seen it briefly in one of her dresser drawers weeks ago, but hadn't thought much of it. Sophia sat down next to him again, holding the box carefully, as if it were something precious. "I didn't want to show you this like this, but I think now's the time," she said, her voice heavy with emotion. She opened the box, revealing a stack of bills, neatly folded and held together with a rubber band. Andrew's heart began to race. He didn't need to ask. He already knew what it meant. "This is all the money I've saved over the past 5 years, Sophia explained, her eyes fixed on the box. "I've been saving to buy my parents a house. They've always dreamed of moving out of the cramped apartment we've lived in since I was a kid. But now..." She closed the box and extended it toward Andrew. "You need it more than they do right now," she said, with a small smile that looked painfully forced. "My parents will understand. They always taught me that we should help the people we love, no matter the circumstances." Andrew froze, as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. He looked at Sophia, searching for any trace of doubt or hesitation in her expression, but there was nothing. only sincerity. She was truly willing to give up something that meant so much to her for him. "Sophia, He tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. "It's okay, Andrew," she said, touching his hand, her eyes full of kindness. "I believe in you. I know you'll get back on your feet. And when you do, we can help my parents together." Andrew felt a lump in his throat that seemed impossible to swallow. He had never felt so small, so unworthy. Sophia's generosity was overwhelming. He had been hoping to find a limit to her kindness, a flaw that could justify his doubts. But instead, she continued to surprise him with her capacity for love and sacrifice. "I don't know what to say," he murmured, holding the box carefully. "This means so much to you. I can't take it." "Yes, you can," she insisted, "because if the situation were reversed, I know you'd do the same for me." Andrew couldn't respond. He simply hugged her, allowing himself for a brief moment to forget the lie he had created. The weight of the blue box in his hands was nothing compared to the weight on his conscience. Sophia trusted him in a way he knew he didn't deserve. That night, while Sophia slept soundly on the couch, as she had promised, Andrew sat at the kitchen table, staring at the blue box. He hadn't opened it again, but he knew that inside it was more than just money. It held Sophia's sacrifice, her selflessness, and her unwavering trust. The question now was, how much longer could he keep up the lie? And more importantly, how much longer could he live with himself because of it? Andrew couldn't sleep that night. The weight of the blue box, now hidden in his bag, felt heavier than any fortune he had ever possessed. He looked over at Sophia on the couch, curled under a thin blanket, and felt the crushing weight of guilt. Everything about her radiated kindness and generosity, and he had lied to her so blatantly to test it. The days that followed were tormenting. Every gesture from Sophia, a smile, a word of encouragement, the care she took in preparing his favorite meals, made the lie feel crueler. Andrew found himself trapped in an internal conflict. The more Sophia showed her unconditional love, the more he despised himself for doubting her. Eventually, he realized he couldn't go on like this. The lie had spiraled out of control. He knew that telling her the truth might mean losing Sophia forever. But keeping it hidden seemed even worse. That evening, as they had dinner together, Andrew felt the moment approaching. He barely touched his food, his stomach churning with anxiety. Sophia, sitting across from him at the small table, noticed his tension and set her fork down on her plate. "Andrew, you're acting strange." "What's going on?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. He took a deep breath, feeling his heart pounding like a drum in his ears. "Sophia, I need to tell you something," he said, the words heavier than he'd anticipated. She leaned forward slightly, attentive, her eyes fixed on his. "Of course, Andrew. What is it?" He felt the words catch in his throat. His mind screamed at him to stop, but his heart knew it was the right thing to do. "I lied to you," he began, his voice faltering. "About everything. About the bankruptcy. About losing my company. None of it is true." The silence that followed felt endless. Sophia blinked a few times, as if the words didn't make sense. "What?" she finally asked, her voice low, almost a whisper. Andrew felt his face burn with shame. He couldn't bring himself to meet her eyes. "I made it all up. I wanted to test you, to see if you were with me for who I am or for what I have." Sophia remained motionless, as if the world had stopped around her. Her eyes, which always glimmered with warmth, were now filled with disbelief. "You lied to me?" The pain in her voice was unmistakable. Andrew tried to reach for her hand, but Sophia pulled away, standing up from the chair. "You lied to me this whole time, made me believe you were ruined, that you needed help." Her voice began to tremble, but she quickly steadied it. "Why, Andrew? Why would you do this to me? Sophia, please, listen to me, he said, standing as well, desperate. I know it was wrong, but I had to be sure. You don't understand what it's like to be surrounded by people who only care about what you have. I needed to know you were different. She let out a bitter laugh, crossing her arms. Different, she repeated, as if the word were an insult. And you thought the best way to find out was to deceive me, to make me think you'd hit rock bottom? Andrew felt the pain in her words like a blow. Sophia, I was scared. No, she interrupted, pointing a finger at him. You weren't scared. You were suspicious. You thought I was like those other people. You thought I was after your money. She began pacing the room, as if trying to process what she had just heard. Andrew wanted to say something, anything, but he knew nothing could undo what he had done. I trusted you, Andrew, she said, stopping and looking at him, her eyes now filled with tears. I gave you everything I had, even my savings, and you thought I was someone who needed to be tested. Sophia, please forgive me, he begged, his voice breaking. Forgive? She let out a bitter laugh. You have no idea what you've just destroyed. It's not just the lie, Andrew. It's what it meant. You didn't trust me from the start. Her words hit Andrew like a knife. She was right. He hadn't trusted her. Sophia ran her hands over her face, trying to wipe away the tears. I don't know if I can keep doing this, she said, more to herself than to him. Andrew felt the desperation rise. Sophia, please. I was an idiot, a coward, but I love you and I know I messed up. She shook her head, holding back the tears that threatened to return. Andrew, love without trust isn't love. You might think you love me, but if you don't trust me, what do we even have? He had no answer to that. I need time, Sophia finally said, her voice softer but still firm. I need to think about whether I can forgive you. Please, give me a chance to prove I can change, he pleaded, desperate. She looked at him for a long moment, as if deciding something within herself. Andrew, I don't know, she finally replied. Maybe I can forgive you. Maybe I can't. But right now, I need time alone. Sophia grabbed her bag and before walking out the door, looked back at him one last time. If you really love me, you'll reflect on what you did, because I'm not the problem here, Andrew. You are. The door closed behind her, leaving Andrew alone in the small apartment. He sank onto the couch, his heart heavy with the knowledge that he had hurt the only person who truly cared about him. In that moment, he realized it wasn't Sophia who needed to prove anything. It was him. Loneliness had been Andrew's only companion since Sophia had walked out the door. The small apartment that once felt full of warmth now felt cold and oppressive. Days passed, each one feeling emptier than the last. He knew that simply apologizing wouldn't be enough. Words, no matter how sincere, could never undo what he had done. Andrew stared at the small blue box Sophia had given him. Since revealing the lie, he had kept it untouched, a constant reminder of the selfless sacrifice she had made for him. The contents of the box symbolized Sophia's love and trust, both of which he had betrayed. But at the same time, it gave him the strength to make a decision. He needed to act. That morning, sitting in his private office, Andrew flipped through old notes he had written about Sophia. Little details he had jotted down about her, her likes, her dreams, the stories she had shared. One sentence in particular caught his attention. One day I want to buy my parents a house with a garden where my mom can plant flowers and my dad can sit in the sun. That was it. Andrew knew what he needed to do. Over the following days, Andrew threw himself into a project that consumed all his energy. He began searching for houses in modest neighborhoods, places that captured the essence of what Sophia had always described. A small but cozy home with enough space for her family to feel comfortable. After days of searching, he finally found the perfect house. It was a modest structure with a bright living room, a spacious backyard, and a small front garden where he could already imagine Sophia's mother planting her favorite flowers. Although he was used to mansions and extravagant properties, Andrew looked at that house and felt something genuine. "This is the one," he said softly to himself. After signing the papers, Andrew felt a weight lift from his shoulders, but he knew this was just the first step. He wasn't just buying a house, he was trying to reclaim a piece of Sophia's heart. Andrew knew that giving the keys directly to Sophia would be wrong. He needed to start with her parents, the same people she loved so deeply and whose happiness had been the reason behind her sacrifices. On a Saturday afternoon, he drove to the neighborhood where her parents lived, carrying an envelope with the house documents and keys. When he arrived at the small building where Sophia's family lived, Andrew felt his heart race. He had never met her parents in such an intimate context, and given everything that had happened, he wasn't sure how he would be received. He rang the doorbell, holding the envelope tightly to hide the trembling in his hands. After a few seconds, the door opened, revealing Sophia's mother, a woman with graying hair and gentle but cautious eyes. "Andrew?" she said, surprised, though without the warmth he had grown used to. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Susan," he began, trying to keep his voice steady. "I know my presence here is unexpected, but I need to talk to you and Mr. Charles." After a brief pause, Susan let him in, but her expression remained wary. Charles was sitting at the kitchen table, and Andrew felt the weight of his piercing gaze as he approached. "So, what brings you here?" Charles asked bluntly. Andrew took a deep breath and placed the envelope on the table. "I came to apologize." The two exchanged a brief glance before turning their attention back to him. "I know I've hurt Sophia deeply, and I know that's affected you as well," Andrew continued, his voice heavy with sincerity. "There's nothing I can do to erase what happened, but I want to show that I'm willing to change, not just with words, but with actions." He slid the envelope toward them. "This is the deed to a house that has always been part of Sophia's dreams for you. It's simple, but it has a backyard, a garden, just like she described." Susan opened the envelope with trembling hands while Charles watched silently. As she looked over the documents, tears welled up in her eyes. "Andrew, what is this?" she asked, her voice shaky with disbelief. "It's yours. Not as payment or to erase what I did, but as a gesture to show that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn back Sophia's trust. And yours as well." Charles remained silent for a long moment before standing and looking Andrew in the eye. "You know this doesn't fix everything, right?" he said firmly. "I know, Mr. Charles," Andrew replied, meeting his gaze, "but it's a start." After a tense pause, Charles reached out and gave Andrew a firm pat on the shoulder. "We appreciate the gesture, but the road to earning Sophia's trust will be long, and it won't depend on us." Andrew nodded, knowing those words were true. That evening, Susan and Charles called Sophia and asked her to visit the new house. When she arrived, already suspecting something, they revealed what Andrew had done. "He's trying, daughter," Susan said gently, "but the decision to forgive him, that's up to you." Sophia remained silent as she walked around the backyard of the house she had dreamed of for years. A mix of emotions flooded her: surprise, gratitude, and above all, confusion. Part of her was touched by the gesture, but another part was still deeply hurt. As she looked at the small garden, Sophia knew the decision wouldn't be easy. Andrew was trying, but would it be enough to rebuild what had been broken? Still without answers, she left the house that night with a heavy heart, but also with a small spark of hope. The weeks following the house delivery were filled with silence. Andrew hadn't tried to contact Sophia since that day, believing he needed to respect the space she had asked for. But each day without her felt emptier, more unbearable. He knew that the actions he had taken so far were just a beginning. They weren't enough. He still hadn't earned the most important thing, the chance to redeem himself directly with Sophia. One afternoon, as he walked alone through his large apartment, now empty and lifeless, Andrew stopped in front of an old photo. It was an image of Sophia smiling in the park where they'd had their first date. He remembered that day as if it were yesterday. The gentle breeze, the sound of children playing, and her smile that seemed to light up the world. That was where everything had started, and maybe it was where he could try for a new beginning. He picked up his phone and after long minutes of hesitation, typed a message. "Sophia, I know I'm asking a lot, but could we talk? I'll be at the park where we had our first date tomorrow at 5 p.m. I'll understand if you don't want to come." Andrew sent the message and set the phone down on the table. He didn't expect an immediate response, maybe not even a response at all. Even so, he felt he had to try. The next day, he arrived at the park an hour early. Every detail of the place brought back memories of Sophia. The bench where they'd sat together for the first time, the ice cream cart where she'd insisted on paying for both, and even the sound of the stream in the background. Andrew sat on the same bench and waited, his heart pounding erratically. When the clock struck 5, he began to lose hope. Maybe Sophia really had decided to move on. But then he saw her. Sophia was walking along the stone path, her arms crossed, her expression serious. Andrew stood up immediately but stayed rooted in place as she approached. "Hi, Andrew," she said, her voice calm but distant. "Hi, Sophia," he replied, fighting the urge to move closer. "Thank you for coming." She gave a slight nod and sat down on the bench, keeping a noticeable distance between them. Andrew felt his heart ache, but knew he had to make the most of the moment. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he began, searching for the right words. "I almost didn't," she replied, looking straight ahead without meeting his eyes. "But my parents told me about what you did, about the house, and I realized I at least owed you the chance to explain." Andrew nodded, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. "Sophia, I don't even know where to start," he said, running a hand over his face. "I guess the best thing is to be honest." She finally looked at him, waiting. "I made a huge mistake. A mistake that's cost me every night of sleep. I tested you because deep down I was scared. Scared of being used, of being deceived. I spent so much time surrounded by people who only cared about what I had that I built a wall around myself. And that wall turned me into someone who couldn't even trust you, the most genuine and incredible person I've ever met." Sophia stayed silent, but her eyes showed she was listening. "When I tested you, I thought I was protecting my heart. But the opposite happened," he continued, his voice starting to falter. "I realized that you were everything I said I wanted, but I also realized I wasn't the man you deserved." Andrew took a deep breath, trying to stay composed. "I know asking for forgiveness won't erase what I did, and I know the things I've done so far, like the house, aren't enough. But I want to promise you something, Sophia. I promise to keep changing, not just to try to win you back, but because you've shown me that I need to be a better person." He stopped, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Sophia was looking at him now, her expression still unreadable. "When you tested me, Andrew, it hurt more than you can imagine," she said finally. "It wasn't just the lie. It was the fact that you didn't trust me from the start. It made me question everything we had." Andrew felt a pang in his chest at her words, but he didn't interrupt. "I won't lie, I'm still hurt, and I don't know if I can get over it anytime soon," Sophia continued. "But I see that you're trying, and that means something." He looked at her cautiously, feeling a flicker of hope ignite within him. "Does that mean you're willing to give me a chance?" he asked, almost afraid of the answer. "A chance to show that you've changed," she clarified firmly. "It won't be easy, Andrew. I'm not going to just forget what happened, but if you're truly willing to prove you've learned from this, maybe we can start over." Andrew felt an overwhelming sense of relief, so strong that he almost couldn't respond. "Thank you, Sophia. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I promise I won't waste it." She nodded slightly, looking up at the sky as the sun began to set, painting the horizon orange. "I hope so," she said. The two sat in silence for a few minutes, watching the park's gentle movements. Andrew felt that though the road ahead would be long, this moment was a small step in the right direction. When Sophia stood to leave, he didn't try to stop her. Instead, he stayed on the bench, watching as she walked away. Despite the distance, he felt something he hadn't felt in weeks: hope. For Andrew, that day in the park wasn't just a conversation. It was the beginning of his journey to become a better man, someone worthy of Sophia's love. A year had passed since that afternoon in the park. For Andrew, that year marked a rebirth. He knew that winning Sophia back would be a long and challenging process, but every little progress, every smile she allowed him to see again, was a reminder that the effort was worth it. Sophia, for her part, watched every gesture of his with caution, but also with an open heart. Andrew didn't just say he wanted to change, he demonstrated it through his actions. From regular visits to her parents' house, helping Charles in the garden, to initiatives in his company that benefited underserved communities, Andrew proved he was trying to become a better person. Sophia knew she still carried scars, but she also knew the love she felt for him had never truly disappeared. Now, Andrew was ready to take the next step. He wanted Sophia to know how much she had transformed his life, how much she meant to him, and above all, he wanted to spend the rest of his life by her side. It was a sunny afternoon when Andrew arrived at Sophia's parents' house, carrying bags filled with flowers, string lights, and candles. He had spent weeks planning what would be the most important moment of his life. He knew Sophia loved simplicity and meaningful gestures, so he decided the proposal should take place in the backyard of the house he had bought for her parents, a place that symbolized love and the dreams they shared. With the help of Susan and Charles, Andrew carefully decorated the backyard. The string lights were hung in the trees and around the small porch. On the table, he arranged Sophia's favorite flowers, daisies and white roses, which she always said were modest but beautiful. At the center, a lit candle completed the intimate setting. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Sophia arrived. Andrew, more nervous than ever, waited for her by the gate. "What's going on?" she asked, intrigued by the decorated backyard. "Just trust me," he said with a smile, extending his hand to her. Sophia followed him to the table where everything was perfectly arranged. Susan and Charles stood nearby, watching discreetly with proud smiles. But Andrew knew that at that moment, all that mattered was her. They sat down, and Andrew served dinner. The atmosphere was serene, with the sound of leaves rustling in the breeze and the soft glow of the lights around them. Sophia looked enchanted, though still curious. "Did you do all this by yourself?" she asked, giving him a slight smile. "I had some help from your parents," he replied, laughing. "But yes, this is all for you." "Why?" Sophia asked playfully, though there was a hint of seriousness in her tone. Andrew took a deep breath. He knew the moment had come, "because I have something very important to tell you." He stood and walked over to Sophia, who watched him with a look of surprise. Andrew pulled a small box from his pocket and without hesitation knelt before her. "Sophia, a year ago I thought I knew what love was. I thought it had to be tested, proven, but you showed me that true love isn't something you measure. It's something you feel, something that grows and transforms you." She placed her hand over her mouth, her eyes beginning to glisten with tears. "You taught me the value of trust, generosity, and most of all, forgiveness. I'm not the man you first met because you changed me, and I am forever grateful for that." He opened the small box, revealing a simple ring with a design that reflected Sophia's understated style. Sophia, you are the best thing that has ever happened to me. You are my inspiration, my strength, my love. And all I want is to spend the rest of my life proving that I am worthy of you. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed freely down Sophia's face. She looked at him, incredulous, but deeply moved. "Andrew," she began, her voice thick with emotion, "you have no idea how much those words mean to me." She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I accept." Andrew felt a wave of relief and joy wash over him. He slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into a tight embrace. Susan and Charles, who had been watching from a distance, clapped quietly, their faces lit up with proud smiles. Sophia looked at Andrew, her face still damp with tears, but now adorned with a radiant smile. "You did it, Andrew," she said, her tone playful but sincere. "Did what?" he asked, laughing. "You convinced me that you really are a different man." They laughed together, and for the first time in a long while, Andrew felt at peace. That night, under the starlit sky and surrounded by the people who mattered most to them, Andrew and Sophia sealed a new beginning. A beginning that wasn't perfect, but one that was real, built on a love that had survived hardships and emerged stronger than ever. The long-awaited day had finally arrived. It was a bright, sunny morning, and the backyard of Sophia's parents' house was filled with an atmosphere of joy and serenity. It was exactly how Sophia had always imagined it, simple, intimate, but deeply meaningful. Every detail of the ceremony reflected who she and Andrew were as a couple, a union shaped by challenges, but strengthened by love and a willingness to start anew. The backyard was decorated with fresh flowers Sophia had chosen herself, daisies, white roses, and lilies, her favorites. The string lights, now a hallmark of their most important moments, were hung between the trees, casting a soft, enchanting glow over the space. The tables were simple, covered in white tablecloths and floral arrangements lovingly crafted by Susan's skilled hands. Andrew stood near the improvised altar, a small wooden arch adorned with flowers, adjusting his tie with trembling fingers. He wore an elegant but modest suit, reflecting his new perspective on life. Around him, friends and family chatted in a relaxed, cheerful mood, but Andrew barely noticed. His heart was focused on one thing: the woman who would soon become his wife. When the soft sound of a violin began to play, everyone turned to the start of the petal-strewn path. Sophia appeared, holding a small bouquet of daisies. She wore a simple white dress, no frills, just a design that accentuated her natural beauty in the most charming way. Her hair was styled in a delicate bun, with a few loose strands framing her face, and a shy smile lit up her features. Andrew felt his breath catch for a moment. To him, Sophia had never looked more beautiful. It wasn't just the dress or her hair. It was the sparkle in her eyes, the serenity in her expression. It was her, completely. Sophia walked slowly down the path, her arm linked with her father's, who wore a proud smile. When she finally reached the altar, Andrew extended his hand to her, their eyes locking. No words were exchanged, just a silent understanding between them. The officiant, a close family friend, began the ceremony with a few words about love and its ability to endure through time and hardships. But the moment everyone had been waiting for came when the couple exchanged their handwritten vows. Andrew spoke first. He took a deep breath, holding Sophia's hands, and began, his voice thick with emotion. "Sophia, a year ago, I was a broken man, though not in the way I thought. My life was full of things but empty of meaning. You were the one who showed me what truly matters. Your love, your patience, your kindness, everything about you taught me how to be a better person." He paused, feeling the tears threatening to fall, but pressed on. "I promise to be a man you can always trust. I promise to take care of you, just as you took care of me, And I promise that every day of my life I'll work to be worthy of your love." Sophia squeezed his hands, her eyes glistening with tears she made no effort to hide. When it was her turn, her voice was soft but steady. "Andrew, when we first met, I never imagined we'd be here today. Our journey hasn't been easy, but every step of it showed me how capable you are of growth and change. You've shown me that love isn't perfect, but it can be real, honest, and built with effort." She took a deep breath, her bouquet trembling slightly in her hands. "I promise to walk by your side, even in the tough times. I promise to be your partner, your friend, and your biggest supporter. And above all, I promise to love you for who you are, and for who you are still becoming." Their words were followed by a silence filled with emotion until the officiant finally pronounced them husband and wife. When Andrew leaned in to kiss Sophia, the small audience erupted into applause and cheers. The celebration that followed was as light-hearted and warm as the ceremony itself. Guests laughed, danced, and shared stories under the backyard lights, while Sophia and Andrew moved from table to table, thanking everyone for being there. In the quiet moment, as the two of them watched their friends and family enjoying the evening, Andrew held Sophia's hand and gently pulled her closer. "I couldn't have asked for anything more perfect than this," he said, looking into her eyes. "Neither could I," Sophia replied, smiling. They stood there in the middle of the glowing backyard, swaying to the distant sound of music and laughter. In that moment, there were no doubts, no lingering hurts, only the certainty that they were exactly where they were meant to be, together, ready to build a new life based on love, trust, and renewal. That day wasn't just the start of a new chapter for Andrew and Sophia. It was a celebration of a love that had faced its deepest flaws and emerged stronger, proving that true love isn't perfect, but it has the power to transform and unite forever. The first months of marriage were a fresh start for Andrew and Sophia. More than just sharing a life together, they were rediscovering each other, building something new on the foundations of trust and respect they had learned to value. Sophia continued working at the restaurant despite Andrew's persistent requests for her to take a break or pursue something she had always dreamed of. But she was firm. Her work kept her connected to who she was and to the people around her. For Sophia, a simple life didn't mean a lack of ambition. It meant cherishing the little things. Andrew, on the other hand, had found a new purpose. Inspired by Sophia's generosity, he decided to use his wealth and resources for something greater. He began investing in social projects, supporting underserved communities with initiatives that included education, affordable housing, and professional training. One afternoon, as they walked together, he shared an idea with Sophia. "I want to start a foundation," he said, holding her hand. Sophia looked at him, surprised but touched. "With my name?" she asked. "Andrew, this is your idea." "No," he corrected, smiling. "All of this started because of you. What I've learned from your kindness, your generosity, it's changed how I see the world. It's the least I can do to honor who you are." Sophia was silent for a moment, her eyes shining with pride and emotion. "Then we'll do it together," she finally said. And they did. Over the following months, the Sophia Green Foundation began to take shape, focusing on helping families find safe and affordable housing, a cause deeply tied to her story. Andrew, who had once been so concerned with profits and status, found genuine joy in listening to the stories of the people they were helping. Sophia, always by his side, was the heart of the project, ensuring every action was carried out with love and respect. Day-to-day life also brought moments of joy and growth. Sophia loved spending afternoons in her parents' garden, helping her mother plant flowers, while Andrew and Charles debated football in the backyard. These moments were simple, yet full of meaning. One evening, while they were at home, Andrew surprised Sophia with dinner. It was a simple meal, made with effort, which made Sophia burst into laughter when she saw the slightly burnt rice and the unevenly chopped vegetables. "This is great, Andrew," she said, trying to stifle her laughter. "Be honest," he replied, pretending to be offended. "It's good for someone who's learning," she teased, and they both laughed together. These small moments defined their life now. There was no longer the weight of doubts or tests, only the lightness of two hearts that had found balance. The past, though painful, became a lesson neither of them would forget. Sophia learned that true love also requires patience, and that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but recognizing the other's effort to do better. Andrew, in turn, realized that love cannot be controlled or measured, but must be earned and nurtured every day. One late afternoon, months after inaugurating the foundation, the two of them walked through the park where they'd had their first date, and later, their reconciliation. The park now held a special meaning for them, a reminder that love is a journey, not a final destination. Andrew held Sophia's hand and looked at her, smiling. "Sometimes I still wonder what I did to deserve you." "You decided to change," she replied simply, returning his smile. "And you gave me the chance," he said. They continued walking in silence, listening to the sound of leaves rustling in the wind and the distant laughter of children playing. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real, and for them, that was more than enough. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Andrew and Sophia walked hand in hand, building step by step a future that wasn't perfect, but was theirs. A true love that had transformed not only their lives, but made them believe every day that the best was still yet to come. I hope you enjoyed today's story. If you did, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought about the story. See you in the next video.